he when he came home for his leave before deployment, my boys and I used to do what we call the sandwich.
Yeah.
And Aaron would be on one side and Matt would be on the other side. And we would either do this in my bed or on the floor, and we would just lay there and talk. And he was talking about, well, I might not come home, and we cried about it and we talked about it and all that. But he was he had a heart. He was always not emotional, but he was caring.
Yeah. Welcome to the Leading with Vulnerability podcast. I'm your host, Yuma Barnett, and today I have a very special guest. I got Miss Pat Marek here. This is going to be a tough podcast for me to get through. Hopefully I can get through it. But Pat is a Gold Star mother. She is the mother of my roommate and best friend, Matthew Commons, right? And she was down here for a 9/11 rededication on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And I've always wanted to talk to some Gold Star family members from this perspective and see, just the story from their eyes. And I thought, who better to start with than Pat? And she was willing to do it, and I thank her for that. And hopefully we can both get through this podcast without having to cut through it and then come back in multiple times. But I'm just really happy to have you here, Pat. I'll hand it over to you and let you introduce yourself, and we'll get into it.
Okay. Again, I'm Pat Marek, and I was born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana, so I'm a Midwesterner by birth. My boys were both born in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I achieved my bachelor's degree at Ball State University in business administration and business education. I got a master's degree in Las Vegas at UNLV when I was, in my 40s, my mid to late 40s. And I was working for Lockheed Martin at the time. And so fortunately, they paid for it. And I was working for the Environmental Protection Agency at the time. I've been married and divorced twice. The boys were born from their dad, Greg Commons. And he lives in Alexandria, Virginia, and I was living in both Colorado and then in Las Vegas, in the Las Vegas area, Boulder City, Nevada. Some of the things that I've done in my career, I've had a really weird, varied career. I started out right out of college teaching high school business education, and then I moved along. I didn't get my master's degree in time, so I lost my teaching license. And so I went into the secretarial trade, which is one of the things I studied. And then I worked my way up from a secretary all the way to a scientist as my life progressed. I worked as a contractor to the federal government most of my life. And eventually, I got a certification in records administration and worked for the National Archives. And that's how I ended my career, was with the National Archives and Records Administration. It was a kick doing that gig, and I got to see a lot of the various federal agencies and work with their records, and it was fun. That was the fun part. The political part wasn't so great. Yeah. I got very frustrated with the political part of it, but eventually I did. I finally retired when I was in 64, almost 65, and so and I've been retired since, and I haven't regretted one day of it. And I live part of my life now here in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and part of my life in Costa Rica. Yeah. So and Costa Rica was my paradise dream come true, and I'm living the life.
And we'll get into a little bit of that Costa Rica life in your past and your more recent years here in a minute, but we'll jump straight into the question that everybody gets asked on here, to the definition of vulnerability and what you think of that.
Well, I thought about that a lot when you sent me the questions, and I finally had to look it up because
Yeah, I was the same way.
I
Yeah.
wasn't really sure. But initially, all I could think of as a definition was weakness.
Right.
And so it meant to me that to be vulnerable, you had to open yourself up. So you had to let people know what your weaknesses were. And because I'm single now, and I have been now for 20 years, and I tend not to ask people for help.
Right, yes.
I figure I can do this myself, whether it kills my back or my legs or whatever. And I'm pretty stubborn when it comes to that. And so I realized, I don't let my vulnerability show. And it made me really stop and think about vulnerability. A funny story, though, is one time I thought I could do some plumbing on my own. That was a big mistake. I had water gushing out everywhere, and I finally had to call a plumber to come and fix what I did, and it cost me about 4 times the amount of what I should have called somebody right away. But I thought I could do it, and I couldn't. But, and I as I get older, I have to admit that there's things I can't do, and I have to be more vulnerable and allow people to see my weaknesses.
Yeah, that's true. You would have made a good ranger or soldier in general, because we're terrible about asking for help too. So
Yeah.
And you're right. Sometimes it gets us in more trouble than it does good, just because we wouldn't be vulnerable and ask for help. So with that in mind and that definition, now we're going to go and talk about Matt, right?
Okay.
And who Matt was before he joined the Army and when he joined the Army, and talk about vulnerability. When I think about it, I think my heart's going about 100 miles an hour right now. But what was Matt? I know Army Matt, but I don't know the Matt as well before he joined the service. What was that like?
And I have to say, I don't know the Army Matt.
Yeah.
So I can tell you what he was like. He grew up pretty fast as a young child. He was born, as I said, in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And we moved around after I got divorced. We moved around a little bit. And we lived in Lakewood, Colorado, and then we moved to Boulder City, Nevada, which is where he ended up going to elementary, middle, and high school. And that was his hometown, and he felt real comfortable there. But as a child, he started walking when he was 6 months old. That's not really common. And he just was on fast forward, it seemed like, all his life. He was climbing bookshelves, falling off of everything. He broke his nose 3 times before he was 10 years old. And it caused problems then in high school. He had to have some surgery. But he always had allergies where he was sniffling, and we used to call him the Kleenex kid because we had to buy so much Kleenex because his allergies were always so bad. And part of it was because of the many broken noses he had. And I have a picture of him after he broke his nose getting his hair cut, and you could just see his whole face is all black and blue on his nose and everything. And it's like, oh my gosh, it kind of slowed down. When he was maybe 5 years old, I think, he was super obsessed with death. Oh. He couldn't ask me enough questions about death and dying and what it was like, and is there a heaven, is there a hell, and you don't expect those kind of questions from a 5-year-old, and it kind of startled me. And throughout his life, he actually did he was always fascinated with that aspect of what was it like to die, and even his senior paper, his term paper in high school was about literally heaven and hell and death and dying, and he looked up all of that stuff. When he came home for his leave before deployment, my boys and I used to do what we call the sandwich.
Yeah.
And Aaron would be on one side and Matt would be on the other side. And we would either do this in my bed or on the floor, and we would just lay there and talk. And he was talking about, well, I might not come home, and we cried about it and we talked about it and all that. But he was he had a heart. He was always not emotional, but he was caring. Yeah. He was pretty compassionate and really liked being with other people. The thing I remember most about Matt is no matter what, he was always laughing. Always laughing. And he was so proud of himself. He had a good self-concept, which I think is very important in anyone's life, no matter what age you are. And he would stand in front of the mirror in high school and he would be flexing his muscles, what little muscles he had back then. Right. And because he wasn't very muscular. When I saw him come back from the first time from a Ranger regiment, I was just shocked at how muscular he was. I couldn't believe the muscles he had on him because he was always pretty skinny and lean and not very muscular, but he liked it. I liked looking at his body. And we called him Beau Brummel all the time because no matter what, he had to have his hair just right. Yeah. He had to have his clothes just right. And for graduation from high school, how many kids would you know that would ask for an iron and ironing board? He liked to iron, and his clothes needed to be perfect. And so he did. He asked for an ironing board. When he was in grade school, starting about, actually, at the age of 5, he started playing soccer. And both the boys played soccer, but he loved soccer. That was like his life all through grade school, high school, and he was a coach. He was a referee, and he didn't like being a referee because he said, "Mom, those parents just yell at you all the time." He said, "But I'm going to keep doing it because I get paid pretty good for this." It was like $10 a game, and which back then that was a lot of money, And so he was pretty good about all that, but he was just an active, normal, average kid, although he did very well in school. Yeah,
when you say that the pre-Army Matt, I have so many memories of just the same thing. Before he would go out, he'd have to look good, or he would look in the mirror. He'd look in the mirror in our room and be like, "Man, I look good tonight." He's just so much confidence in himself.
I know, he used to do that.
I remember he was in our bathroom and he was shaving his legs. And I was like, "What are you doing? Why are you doing that?" He's like, you got to try it, man. It just feels good. I mean, when we're running, the wind, there's no hair there. And he was just like full of confidence.
Yeah.
And I wish I knew he liked to iron more because I asked him to iron more of our uniforms, but he didn't do that for me. Yeah.
Oh, no, he loved, for some reason, he liked to iron. Yeah. It's just kind of weird.
I was looking through some of the photo albums, and there's a few pictures where you can tell he took them himself. He's like one of the original selfie people.
Yeah.
Pre-selfie, pre-phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
He did love himself.
Yeah, he did, but not in a bad way. He was just confident. And he was always laughing and funny.
One of my favorite memories of him, two. I'm going to say two of them. My favorite memories was I'm going to change that 3. He always would come up to me because of his allergies. He had the worst bad breath, I have to say that. And sorry, Matt. But anyway, he would come up to me and he would go to kiss me on the cheek, and he would just, instead of kissing me, he would go like that into my face and just give me the worst bad breath. Other times he would come, and he was taller than me, who isn't
not hard,
who isn't taller than me, and he would just grab my head and force my head under his armpit, his stinky armpit, after he was playing soccer. And then he was always with his buddies coming off the field playing soccer in high school, and he would moon me. And he'd go, "Hey, Mom!" And then he'd moon me. And it's like, oh, Matthew.
Oh, my goodness.
And when he came home for block leave, this was a kind of a good memory of mine. He came home from block leave the first time, not before deployment. It was right after Ranger Ball, and it was the first time I saw him after he joined regiment, 1st Battalion, and he picked me up at the airport, and he just like swung me around. I said, Matthew, I'm too heavy for you to do that. And he says, no, I'm strong now. I can pick you up and do anything. And he proved it. He picked me up and he carried me out the door and everything. It was just, it was like, you would see in the movies. Yeah.
So when he joined the Army, what did you think of? Not only did he join the Army, but he came in to be a Ranger. So what's the mom perspective on that?
Well, first of all, he we talked him into going to college first. It wasn't a good idea for us to talk him into it because he flunked out. He was not invited back to UNLV. And so anyway, actually UNR. And so he said, okay, now I can do it. I'm going to join the Army. And so he says, I don't want anybody taking care of me. You're not going to have to take care of me. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm a big boy now. I'm going to go do this. And so he joined, and actually we were proud of him. I was very proud of him because he didn't want us to give him any money. He didn't want me to have to take care of him. And he said, someday I'm going to take care of you. Yeah. I mean, those were his words. Someday I'm going to take care of you. You've taken care of me all my life, Mom, and someday I'm going to take care of you. And so he kind of did. When he joined Ranger Regiment, I was so proud of him.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe it because he wanted to join. He had an option. He said he either wanted to go into Ranger, wanted to be a Ranger, or he wanted to do Navy SEAL. Well, he wasn't a strong swimmer,
right.
So Navy SEALs were out.
Yeah, I feel that pain.
Yeah,
I'm not either.
And so he went in. His dream was then to go into Ranger, to be a Ranger and go to Ranger school. So
that's And so when he came in, I mean, Matt, he brought that same personality. He was always having him in selection was great because he just hunted. He found the good stuff in everything.
He did. And he would write to me and he would say, oh, this is so hard.
Yeah.
And I would say, that's okay. You've got the strength for it. Your head is there. Keep going with your head. Keep going with your head. And I mean, we were like best friends. When he could start calling me again, we would talk for 3 hours at a time, and his buddies would say, who are you telling all that stuff to? And he'd say, my mom. Yeah. And they go, you tell her that kind of stuff? And they, yeah, we talk about everything together.
I know.
So
he went through, you came to his graduation from RIP, and then he went to 175. And we were only there for about 9 months before 9/11 happened.
I know.
And we're on the 20-year anniversary of 9/11.
Right.
So when you saw 9/11 happen, did you have a fear? Like, you don't know what the future holds now?
My heart was in my stomach the whole day. And I just remember I was walking around. I was staying I had just moved from Boulder City, just had gotten a divorce. My life was a train wreck, and I was living with my brother and his wife at the time. And I was wandering around their 8 acres up in the mountains, and I don't know, I couldn't even settle because I was picking up sticks and making little piles of sticks. So I was like crazed. And because I just knew that you guys were going over. I knew he was going to go over. And I told my sister-in-law, and I was hysterically crying, and I said, he's going to die. I know he's going to die. My stomach is just telling me he's going to die. And she kept saying, don't talk like that. Yeah. Don't talk like that. And I said, but I just have this feeling. And then Aaron and I, after 9/11 in October, it was just 3 weeks after 9/11, we got real cheap flights to come to Savannah. And we came to visit Matthew. And he said, if I don't make it, he says, I know that it's possible, that it's a 50-50 chance. And I said, I know. But I have to support you no matter what you do. I'm here for you. And no matter what happens, I'm going to be here for you. And I said, it's not easy, but I'm here for you.
Yeah. So after you saw him there, did you see him again before we deployed in December? Did he come home?
He came, you guys had a 2-week block leave, and so he spent 2 weeks with me. A week with me and a week with his dad. And so we did all kinds of crazy things. We made cookies, and it was right before Christmas, so we had our Christmas then with him. And so it was our last Christmas together, and we made cookies, and he made camel cookies with the frosting.
Yeah. So he came back. We deployed in December. Did you communicate? How was Matt about keeping communications?
Well, as soon as they got email, he sent me an email, and I only got 3 emails from him, and then you guys got. I think a sat phone.
Yeah. And
so he was able to call, but I only got 2 or 3 phone calls from him. So and that fateful night was one of the days that he was supposed to call us.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And his dad and I were trying to figure out, because he would split his time on the phone with his dad and then with me. So
yeah. So when you see the pictures of before, like of us burning the poop and all the stuff we were doing over there.
I love that burning the poo picture, because I call it his little shit grin.
Yeah.
Because he always had that grin.
He always had that grin.
It
got him in trouble in the Army sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine, because he just seemed to always be smiling, and it was like, no, but the smile wasn't just for fun.
Right.
The smile was his way of helping himself stay on top of everything.
Yeah.
And no matter how bad things were, he had to smile so that he could keep himself in that frame of mind.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and the burning the poop, that was like kind of our getaway from everything. Me and Matt would get up and volunteer to go do that together, because being privates, that was 3 hours. We knew exactly what we were doing for those 3 hours.
I know, and then he would say, well, at least it kept me warm.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
So, oh goodness, here we go. So March 4th. Just saying the date is hard. What does it mean to a mom?
Well, we at Gold Star families call those angelversaries. Okay, and when I got informed, it was a really, like I said, my life was a train wreck. Mm-hmm. 7 months earlier, I'd been divorced. I moved from Boulder City, Nevada, to Colorado, and then to Alexandria, Virginia. The CAO couldn't find me. They could not find me. They didn't know where I lived. My address had changed 3 times since Matt had written it down on the paperwork. So,
and the CAO is the Casualty Assistance Officer who finds the relatives and delivers the news, and he couldn't find you. They
couldn't find me, but they found Greg, his dad, and so Greg. I had just moved to Alexandria, Virginia. I didn't even have furniture. I was sleeping on the floor. I had my dog, her dog food, my laptop, and some clothes to go to work with. That was it, in my car, and so I literally had nothing here in Alexandria, and so my ex-husband Greg, he calls me at 11 o'clock at night, and he says, he calls me Patricia. He said, Patricia, you need to come over to my house. The military's here, and they want to, and I said, is Matt dead? And he said, no, he's just been critically injured. So he lied to me, right, thinking that I could drive. But I knew he was lying.
Yeah.
I just knew it. In my gut, I knew it. And so I was hysterical driving to his. I'd never been to his house before, so I'm driving at 11 o'clock at night. He's guiding me to his house because I had a cell phone, but no GPS back then. And so I get to his house, and I look inside the door, and the front door's open, and I see the priest and two military guys, and I fell out of the car. I just couldn't even walk. I just fell. My body was like, oh, I don't know. I just couldn't walk, and I struggled to get up, and Greg saw me pull up. I had left the car door open. My dog didn't go anywhere. She just stayed there looking at me like she knew something was wrong.
Something was wrong.
And so Greg came out, and I was hysterical, screaming. And he said, shh, the neighbors. I said, I don't care about the neighbors.
Yeah.
My son is dead, you know?
Yeah.
And he said, no, let's go in. And then the priest put his hand on me, and I said, don't touch me. I was angry. I was so angry. And the casualty affairs officer goes, ma'am, I'm sorry to inform you. He had to say that three times. I said, no, it's not true. And he said, ma'am. And finally he got right in front of my face, and he said, ma'am, I'm sorry to inform you that your son has been. And, it's like those words echo in your mind every March 4th. And it's like every March 4th, it's a sad day for me. And, I just they call us survivors. That's all you can say you are, is a survivor.
Yeah. So, March 4th obviously holds a lot to all of us. Mm-hmm. I've talked to you about it. The way I dealt with March 4th for the last 20 years was going back.
Yeah.
And you have to do it. So, as time has passed, how do you find that you're dealing with it as we go? What helps, or has just...
Well, when I'm here, I have, since I retired, I have spent the last, since 2014, on traveling.
Yeah.
That's my happy place. And so I will spend March 4th traveling somewhere. It's not that I don't remember.
Yeah.
It's that it helps me get through the day. And March 4th to me is more significant than even his birthday, which was February 18th,
Right.
2 weeks before he died. And so I go to my happy place whenever I can on March 4th. This past year, I came back for my COVID shot, and so I was here for March 4th, and it was the worst March 4th I've had since I retired and was traveling on March 4th. So I know where my happy place is. I know where what I need to do. I tend, as a Gold Star mother, I tend not to attend a lot of Gold Star activities or even TAPS activities, because it takes, I'm different than other parents, I think, and other Gold Star families. For me, I need to try, it's not to not remember it, but not to
just stay in it all the time.
Stay in it and distinguish it continuously.
Oh, yeah.
So for me, I have to pull away. I had to pull away from all of that because it was, I wasn't living life. I wasn't. My life was stuck. It was like, the old record.
Yeah.
And the needle got stuck where it was scratched, and it kept replaying that same thing all the time. And I've got to do something about this. Yeah. And so on the 10th anniversary of Matt's death, I decided to have a big party reception, but I did it at church, and I had the deacon help me do all of this, and he was former military. And so I displayed all the paraphernalia that I had at that time about Matthew and laid everything out for everybody to look at. And then, honestly, until this interview, I never pulled it back out again.
Oh, wow.
But I had a big reception. I catered it and everything, had flowers just like it was a wedding reception, because for me, it's hard to go to weddings because I knew I would never see Matthew get married. Mm-hmm. And of my two sons, Matthew would be the one to have given me grandchildren. And so I don't have grandchildren. And so it's been a kick having your kids.
Oh, good.
I've been loving it. I'm in heaven with them.
Oh, that's good. And you talk about, so I had no idea until you brought out some of the pictures and the albums when you came. There's hundreds of letters from congressmen and generals, and they came just I mean, I can't imagine. That's got to be just hard every day. Every time you open the mailbox, something's there reminding you, and comes from a good place. But
yes, exactly. In fact, just last week I got a letter from SOCOM. Thank you for correcting me on where it came from, because I didn't bring it with me. But it came from SOCOM telling us that no matter what, even though the Afghanistan has ended, that my son's life will never be forgotten. And, I get letters from 1st Ranger Battalion and Regiment, and now from Fort Carson, because that's where my CAO is from.
Oh,
we have a CAO for life.
For life, okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know
it's
that.
for life. And so I get invited to all the changes of commands at 3 bases.
Oh, yeah.
And I have an ID to get on base at Fort Carson. It's supposed to allow me on base everywhere, but it's a special Gold Star ID. And so I get letters from 3 different bases, from commanding officers, from CAOs. Every time the CAO changes, I get we have a reintroduction. So every time the chaplains change at each of those bases, we get a letter from the chaplains. And so it's like, all year long, every single year, something's coming. And after the 10 years, I stopped keeping all of that stuff. I don't keep it anymore. I've got 3 50-gallon plastic containers full of mementos and things like that people sent. Within the first year, and maybe it was even longer, of Matthew's death, I got teddy bears and Christmas ornaments from people I didn't even know. And I still get letters from people I don't know.
Wow.
Every Christmas I get Christmas letters from people I don't know.
You can't find, it's got to be hard to find closure.
It is. And that's why when I retired, that was exactly why I decided I needed to get out of the country.
Yeah.
Because people can't find me there.
That's right.
When I'm out of the country. So my real happy place is traveling and meeting new people and learning about new cultures and the history of the places where I travel to. I love history, and I love learning about cultures, and especially the foods. I like to take cooking classes pretty much everywhere I travel.
Yeah. It's a maybe cliche but Matt would want you to do that, right?
Yeah, if you had said that to me the day after he died, I would have punched your lights out.
Yes.
Yeah. But people would tell me that all the time. Oh, Matt would want you to be happy. Matt. And I would say to them, how the hell do you know what Matt would want?
Yeah.
You don't know him, but to be honest, you're right. Yeah. Matt was a happy person. And actually, when I left Alexandria, Washington, D.C. area and took a job back in Colorado, I stood on his grave and I swore to him that I would carry on a smile.
Yeah.
And
you've done well.
Thank you. But, it's when I go to events and all that, I try not to cry because I feel like I have to be there for other new parents. We call them newbies, but it's and I don't want to embarrass Matt by crying and being that sobby, angry. But I promised him I am not going to be an angry, hateful, ungrateful mother. I want people to look at you with pride.
Yeah.
And so in order to do that, I have to be that person and facilitate that pride in you.
Right. And you have another son.
I do.
So, I mean, you can't.
Well, and that's a big issue too, because I see a lot of parents when they lose a child, and it doesn't matter how the child is lost.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's by war. I know children that have died from cancer. Because I've gone to help groups for parents who've lost their children, and it doesn't matter. These parents are fixated on the child that died and not the one that's alive. And I have to admit, in the first few years, I was kind of that way. But I had a boss who struck me right between the eyes with the statement that you're living for your dead son, not your alive son. Get your act together. You need your son that's alive needs you, and be that mother he needs.
Wow.
So when he said that, I said, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was doing that, And you kind of don't realize it.
Yeah.
And you get lost in the grief and it becomes almost a habit.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to minimalize that grief. The grief never, ever goes away. Never. The grief stays with you. And when you talk about vulnerability, that's a huge vulnerable spot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, my family don't want to see me constantly grieving. They want to see that happy Pat that was always hanging out with them and, partying and all that other stuff. And so when I'm in Costa Rica, when I'm traveling, that's my happy place. And I am that person. And I try to be that when I'm back in the States. But it's harder.
It is.
Because I have all the reminders.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
So all of the past 20 years, you spoke about some of the dedications and VFWs and things that are named after Matt now. And when I think about it, I just think about the barracks that's named after him.
The barracks was... actually, that was the second thing that was named after him immediately after. It wasn't within a month. There was the Boulder City VFW post rededicated themselves as the Matthew Allen Commons Post 36, and they are not a drinking post. So many of VFWs are they're based on bars and drinking and that kind of stuff. But this is, they work with the local VA hospital and nursing home, and they do a lot of philanthropic stuff throughout Nevada, and they have been named like the #1 VFW post 2 years in a row. This past year and the year before last. Yeah. And they have a wonderful post leader. I can't think what they're called, but
I don't know either.
Yeah. But anyway, Bob Garlow, and I'll mention him by name, is just an absolutely amazingly wonderful person, and his wife Sue runs the auxiliary for the women, and I'm a lifetime member of the auxiliary, and so whenever I'm in town, I attend the meetings and stuff like that. But there's memorials all throughout the United States with Matthew's name on them, like in California, in Dayton, Ohio, at SOCOM. Places that I've not been. Yeah. There's one in Chicago, and not Chicago, but in Illinois, near Chicago. And so, there's a lot of different memorials throughout the place, and you think, oh my goodness. And then when he got the chapel dedicated to him at Bagram, I was like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And then to have the barracks with his name on it is like, oh my gosh, he was just a private. You know
right?
how? I can't understand why he's been honored so. It boggles my mind because he was just a private, you know, and you know, not like Mark and the others that were higher ranked and all that had been in regiment longer, and he wasn't in very long.
Right.
He was a newbie, and yet all the honors that have been bestowed upon him just boggle my mind. So
Yeah, I don't like that, just a private, because he was more than just a private. You know, he obviously he struck a chord with a lot of people. That's why there's a lot of stuff out there.
well, and then in Boulder City, for example, the VFW post has an annual scholarship, and their scholarship is awarded through an essay they have to write on what it means to me, what freedom means to me. So,
the events of the last month in Afghanistan, any emotion?
yes, anger.
Yeah.
I'm angry. I don't think, this is my personal opinion, so I'm just going to qualify that. It made me angry how quickly things were done. It seemed last minute, not planned, and it bothered me a lot that so many people were left behind that have assisted the United States with their, you know, the Afghanis that assisted us, and they're just left there to be killed.
Yeah.
And that's not right. We owe them for all the service they gave us. They may not have been in the military or anything, but they served us and protected our service members throughout the 20 years. They deserve to be given citizenship here in the U.S. and given protection, if nothing else. And I think that it just seemed so haphazard.
Yeah.
It was like one day, all of a sudden, I read that they're pulling out. And I'm going, okay, Matt, what do you think about this? And I have to admit, I don't think I'm crazy, but maybe I am. But I talk to Matthew all the time. And what do you think about that, Matt? Does that mean that you died for nothing? And in my heart, I felt and reasoned that no, it was after 9/11. And I mean, I felt like he gave me the words somehow to understand and be okay with how he died. And, you know, but the last 13 that died, that shouldn't have happened. Should not have happened.
I agree.
And I was sick that day. I cried all day long for those new parents, those new Gold Star parents. It was not, that should not have happened.
And I don't think you're crazy, because I talk to Matt all the time too.
Oh, well, he listens to me a lot better now than when he was alive. So he has helped me. He has, I mean, talking to him, I use him as my angel to intercede for other people, to cure them, and, you know, from illnesses and stuff like that. So,
that's good.
Yeah.
So coming off, you have, just talking to you the last couple of days, your life has been very interesting the last 10 years. You've been kidnapped. You traveled, you spend a lot of time in like Central and South America type stuff by yourself.
I do. I travel by
around?
myself because I can't find anybody to travel with. So I just decided, okay. So I started traveling to Central America. I'm not totally by myself. I mean, I get on the airplane, I get off the airplane, and I'm by myself. But I always have somebody picking me up from the school, you know, and I go to a language school. And that's how I first started traveling throughout Central and South America. I went to a language school, and they would set you up with the family. And so you're living with the family. You're not by yourself. And those families are now my families for life. I still email them. I still talk to them on Facebook. And, you know, we talk back and forth in Spanish. And so it was always one of my goals to learn another language. And I chose Spanish because we have so many Spanish-speaking people in the U.S. I thought, hey, that's probably a good language to learn. And I think it's very musical sounding. I love when you hear somebody speaking fluently, properly. It's a beautiful language. And so I spent 3 winters in Guatemala learning, staying with the same family. And then I spent a winter in Costa Rica, Guatemala, and Ecuador studying, and I was with families that whole time. And when I went to Ecuador, I made sure that the hotel where I was staying at had an English-speaking driver pick me up. I paid extra money for it, but it's safe. And then that driver took me 2 hours to where the language school was in Baños, and that's where I got kidnapped. And
that's a whole nother story.
That's a whole nother story. It was kind of a kidnapping, but not. Yeah. But anyway,
close enough that we can call it that.
Yeah. And then I've been to. And then I worked for 6 months and went to school in Honduras. And I worked at an orphanage in Honduras for 5 months out of the 6.
And now you live half your time in Costa Rica?
Yeah, I try to spend as much time as I can in Costa Rica, where I have a house with my brother and his wife. And I now have a lot of friends down there, and we have a good time. I mean, it's... I can't say that we party all the time, but we enjoy each other's company, let's put it that way. That's where I feel like I'm healthiest, and I laugh a lot.
You just got to keep moving and doing stuff, I think, right?
Yeah. Well, it was hard after, I went to Thailand and Cambodia I also belong to a travel club that's called We Are Bamboo. And so you're never really traveling by yourself. It's a travel group, but they are a ecotourism group, so a voluntourism where you volunteer to work with the locals, and then in between you get to visit a lot of different locations and places. Like in Thailand, I took care of elephants and I lived with the elephant family, but yet we went to Angkor Wat and we went to a lot of temples and stuff like that. So we did a lot of touring in Thailand, and then we went to Cambodia where I got hit by a motorcycle and broke my pelvis. And since then I've had a problem walking, but yeah. But this year this travel club is doing. We're going to work with sea turtles in Costa Rica.
Oh, wow.
On the coast.
That's awesome.
So we'll be taking care of the sea turtles and helping gather their eggs up and putting them in incubators so that they can survive.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Pat, I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you for having me.
You said you never have grandkids, but are you sure you have 4?
And they are the sweetest things. I love them.
Every time one of my kids was born, I definitely thought of Matt and about how good of a father he would have been.
He would have been, He would have, well, one of his friends that grew up next door to him in Boulder City named his son after Matthew. Yeah. So his name is Matthew Allen.
I thought about doing that. It was just too hard for me.
Oh, no.
It was hard.
I can understand that. I can understand that.
We love you. I
love you too. I hope we can keep I hope this has broken the ice so that we are family now.
We are. We even spoke about it a little bit. We've kind of stayed apart in some ways.
So we wouldn't hurt each other, right?
Each other, right?
Yeah.
It's just
as a reminder, but I'm glad that we can break that now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I can't wait for you to come down to Costa Rica.
I can't either. I can't wait. And I love you. And thanks again.
I love you too. Thank you.